The Why Me Project, an exclusive presentation of Faith Strong Today.
I know, being in radio, Hollie, that we talk a lot of music, but it's always good when we get to talk about probably one of the most important things there is in the world.
Next to faith, next to family.
And family. There's football.
There is that.
And who better to talk football than somebody who's played, yes, somebody who's a champion, and somebody who's willing to take a couple of minutes and hang with us. And Jordan Norwood, my friend, how are you?
I'm doing great. Thank you for having me.
We like to ask the skill testing question because we never know where it's going to go. My friend, who are you and where did you come from?
Awesome. I am Jordan Norwood. I am a creative at heart. I am also a father and husband. I come from, that's a tough question for me. I was born in Hawaii, but grew up all over the place. Ended up in high school in Pennsylvania, then went to Penn State University. So kind of, all over the place, Hawaii, and then mostly the East Coast. But I'm in Denver, Colorado right now.
You talk about growing up and you were all over the place, and I'm curious to know as to why. Was that a part of your childhood story?
Yeah, it's a big part of my childhood story. So my father's a college football coach. He played at University of Hawaii. My mom is born and raised Hawaii. I'm Black and Filipino. But yeah, so his professional journey took him from playing in Hawaii to playing briefly in the CFL, then straight into coaching for, the past 35 years now. So, that's been everywhere from University of Arizona to Penn State University, where I went, down to Texas Tech in Lubbock, Texas. So, we've been all over the place.
We're talking coaching football, not coaching badminton.
Yeah. On this occasion, yes, we're talking about football.
Although I hear his dad has a mean serve when it comes to badminton.
Yeah, I'm sure he does.
Just smashing those birdies. So is that where the love of football came? Because you grew up with it with dad being a part of it? Or did you find, similar to Faith, kind of your own journey with football?
Also a good question. I wouldn't even start. I don't know. I always had this weird relationship with the word love and football in the same sentence. First of all, it's something that I was always interested in, for sure. Also always good at. In retrospect, I would say a lot of my success in football lent itself to things that I didn't realize I was learning being the child of a college football coach. So that's kind of the story. And when it comes to, did I always love football? It's, I don't know. It's one of those sports that people have a love-hate relationship with. They love, and even for myself, I loved going out there on Sundays and competing, or a Saturday in college and competing in a game. But there's only 10 of those in a year, or in the NFL, there's only 16 games in a year. That's a lot of other times to be out there on the field, sweating and bleeding and, getting injured. And that's where the hate part comes in pretty quickly. Other sports, obviously there's a lot that goes into it too. But there's just something about football where there's not guys after they retire playing football going and, playing pickup football every Saturday, unlike basketball where I'll go play pickup basketball as much as I can. It's just an interesting sport, I think. When
we talk to pastors' kids, we talk about a pressure on being a pastor's kid. What about when there's you have a football coach as a dad, and then you are playing the game of football? Is there a pressure? Is it helpful having him as a coach, or is it a detriment because he's probably more critical on you than maybe a regular dad would be?
Super fair question. I think that in my particular case, it was a benefit, 100%. My dad was somebody who, first of all, led me to Jesus, but also somebody that intentionally did not put pressure on me. I played at Penn State while my dad was coaching at Penn State, and he intentionally took himself out of the recruiting process while I was in high school. So he left it up to the other coaches on the staff to, offer me a scholarship or not offer me a scholarship. So it was kind of it was a very intentional dynamic with my dad, kind of remaining, my dad and supporting me in that way. He coached at Penn State, but he didn't coach me specifically. He was a defensive coach and I was an offensive player. So he wouldn't, we wouldn't have a whole lot of interaction other than me making him yell at his players.
Yeah. Oh, I
Yeah.
love that. And can I just drop in the Canadian connection here? Because I know we've got projectors who listen in the Calgary area, and there's a connection there too, isn't there?
There's a connection. So my dad played for the Stampeders very briefly. So he left college, I think maybe 87 or so, and went and played and made it only a few months there actually before he was diagnosed with diabetes, and he decided to stop playing at that point and kind of get that under control.
What I do love though is that your dad was able to, there's coach dad and there's dad, but
Right.
One of the big things is that you had said that he had led you to faith. So was faith a big part of your family growing up?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it was a huge part of our family growing up. It's something that for me, growing up in the way that we did, bouncing around from, elementary school to elementary school and middle school to middle school, it was always something that I needed to lean on. I was a shy person in school. I felt the pressure of making friends heavily when I would enter a new school. I was leaning on wholeheartedly at an early age, trying to find this identity, and, what that identity looked like in Christ, is something that I was, seeking, to the point that, my dad led me to Christ when I was 13 years old in a grocery store parking lot, while we were just having a great conversation. So yeah, a huge part of my upbringing.
How did your faith play into navigating then the career into the football world?
Yeah. I mean, it played in, a big role. As far as my football career goes, it was something that even in high school, I was always a good football player, but I wasn't a highly recruited, football player. I didn't have a whole lot of, offers to go play at, Alabama or, this school or that school. So I was always kind of, an underdog, I guess. And, I had to make the most of, small opportunities. And, big picture, it's something that I always leaned on my faith with, God, what do you have for me here? God, I don't feel like I'm good enough, but, can you just show up, because I need you to show up? And I specifically remember in high school, I was a very undersized, individual in high school, whether I was an athlete or not. I was just a small guy, a small fry. And, I just remember, having a college football coach that was coaching at Penn State at the time pull me aside after a football camp in the summer and say, Jordan, you need to know that you can play Division I football. You're good enough. Don't let anybody tell you otherwise. And it was that conversation that propelled me to, not even really have the confidence still, but propelled me to take the risk on myself and go play Division I football. All the while I have a Division I football assistant coach as a dad, that easily could have told me the same thing and did tell me the same thing. But, it just hits a little different when it comes from anyone else other than your dad. So yeah, my faith and, having people in my corner that, didn't necessarily have to be in my corner, but that support system was, crucial for me.
It's one thing to play D1 ball. It's another thing then to make it into the NFL. You're good enough to play for Penn State. Did you think that you were good enough then to be able to get ready for Sundays? Not
while I was entering Penn State. It took me until, I ended up playing as a freshman at Penn State. But it wasn't until like my junior year probably that I actually saw a teammate leave school early to go to the NFL. So a junior teammate of mine left, like forgoed his senior year and went to the NFL. That I was like, wait a second, like, okay, so
Yeah,
I guess this could actually, like, I guess that's probably the next step for me. And that being said, I didn't end up getting drafted into the NFL. I ended up, being an undrafted, free agent that, signed with the Cleveland Browns. But, it was just a continual faith journey for me. From, not getting drafted to being cut and getting injured, all of those sorts of things play into my story.
I'm curious though, with the things that played into your story and almost that element of disbelief, like, can I actually do this? Um, I grew up as a mixed kid, and I'm curious to know, did that also impact your perception of yourself and the football world and how far you could actually go?
That's a great question. There's a lot of things that did play into my perception of myself and the world around me, related to skin color and my skin color. So growing up in Hawaii, I mostly grew up around my Filipino family, bouncing around. I was in all white neighborhoods, all Mexican neighborhoods, all black neighborhoods. So I kind of ran the gamut of, being immersed in different cultures, and finding my place within, those communities also, which was extremely beneficial. Being able to build a respect for, people, like, period, was a huge part of my upbringing, unintentionally. So as far as, kind of looking in the mirror and, seeing limits on what I could do or who I could be because of my skin color, I didn't really have that, immediate response to seeing that in myself. But I definitely had to overcome that, kind of chip away at that growing up, and being immersed in different communities and, growing that love and respect for people, is definitely a part of my story.
And then injuries as well. Let's talk injuries.
Let's talk about them.
Nobody ever wants to talk injuries, Hollie.
No, I do. I had an ACL injury from soccer.
Okay.
So, Jordan, hold on one second. Hollie likes to find some sort of way that she can be like, we talked to somebody the other day about, being in jail, and Hollie's like, yeah, I could totally relate to it. And he's like, you were in jail? She's like, no. The struggle. So now Hollie's like, I had an ACL injury.
Yeah.
Like, this is her way of trying to make it like you guys are now like super close.
Yeah, we're best friends. We've had injuries, and although mine was, there was no one around me, I just fell in the field and hurt myself. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, injuries they're tough, no matter if nobody is around or people are around.
It's more psychologically damaging.
Right. As long as it's not on camera and on YouTube or anything. But yeah, I mean, I definitely had my share. I also had an ACL and my share of concussions and shoulder surgery. So, I mean, those have been definitely opportunities for me, again, to lean into my faith and lean into my support system at those times and, kind of figure out what God has planned for me and all that. I
look at professional sports and I feel, and we've had this conversation before, it feels like football, if there's a professional sport to have a faith, football is that sport. Yeah. Because you would see people gather around in the field and they're praying with one another, something you don't necessarily see in basketball or in hockey or in baseball. Sure. Did you find it easier to have a faith being a professional athlete?
Maybe. I mean, there's definitely a faith community in football. I mean, like you said, you see players from both teams coming together and praying on the field. I mean, every team that I've ever been on, there's, the opportunity for Bible studies or, a team chaplain. There's specific programming to feed our faith. Maybe it's because they know that it's an important piece of, success for an athlete. And maybe it's specifically football. Maybe there's something to the violence of the sport and the, safety that is in question with the sport that lends itself to prayer and, and hope and, needing a higher power to have those traveling mercies and game day mercies over you. So
I want to talk about unsung heroes. A friend of mine has a T-shirt that says "Kickers are football players too," but there's also the return game. And in the return game, you look at yourself or a Devin Hester or a Ted Ginn or a Joshua Cribbs. There are so many moments, highlight reel moments of return guys doing their thing. Do you think that you guys need more love Because, I mean, theoretically, games change because of you guys touching the ball.
Well, first of all, it's an honor to be mentioned in a sentence with some of those guys, or all of those guys. Josh Cribbs is somebody that I had the pleasure of playing with in Cleveland. So one of my all-time personal favorites. But I think that for me, watching a game, watching kickoff and punt returns is one of the most exciting plays, or has the potential to be the most exciting. They've started to change some of the rules where that's less and less of a, exciting play to watch anymore. So at this point, kind of is the answer. I don't think that that they deserve more, because there's just not as many plays even happening anymore, especially kickoffs. I mean, they're mostly touchbacks, or nobody's even trying to run them for a touchdown anymore. But, I think, maybe, I mean, specifically those guys that you mentioned, yes, I think they deserve, more attention. And, Josh Cribbs specifically is the best football player that I've ever played with, period. Any position. I mean, first of all, he could play any position on the football field. And there's not many people that could literally line up at about 9 out of the 11 positions and be successful. So he specifically is somebody that deserves a lot more credit, in my opinion.
What about life outside of football? When it came to taking that moment where you're like, I think it's time to move on to a new phase. How supportive was the family, your wife, all of that? How was that transition for you?
Well, first of all, I would say that I'm still transitioning. So I retired in 2017. I just think that spending 30 plus years playing organized sports, it takes a little bit more than, a couple of years to transition out of that. So I don't know if I'll ever not be transitioning, but, to answer your question, my family was incredibly supportive. Maybe even beyond that, like actually celebratory that I was not playing anymore. Yeah, exactly. Specifically, my wife and my mom, were excited at the thought of me not playing football anymore. So yeah, that makes things, a lot easier, to have a supporting, cast that are wanting to see me succeed outside of playing football. And helping me to do that, also. So, it's been good. It's been great.
I know that Hollie's going to want to ask you what your why me moment, and it's something that we find very special to ask each and every one of our guests. But before we get to that, I have 2 quick questions for you. Sure. Super Bowl champion, which is something that nobody can take away from you. What do you do with the Super Bowl ring, or do you wear it all the time?
I don't wear it all the time.
Why not?
That's a great question.
I would. All the time.
I would, but I would lose it, and I have lost it several times. I don't take good care of it. But it's on my to-do list. Okay. Lock and safe, better care. Mm-hmm. So I usually wear it if there's an event, or if I'm going somewhere where I know that there's individuals, usually kids, that would be excited to see a Super Bowl ring and all that. So it comes out probably 10 times a year.
I'm a big kid. I would have bubble baths with it. The things that I would do with a Super Bowl ring.
Oh,
that's awesome.
The other thing is that you did retire. You've been out of the game now for a few years. Can you still sit around and watch it? Can you still enjoy the love of football, or does it bring you back to you want to be out there and you still want to be, wearing the pads and the helmet on a Sunday?
I can definitely watch it now. At this point, to be honest, probably the first 2.5 years after retiring, I just thought that I was not going to be interested anymore ever in my life in watching it. And I was fine with that. Like I did that and wasn't really interested in watching, at all. I didn't watch much at all. It wasn't, I didn't think there was any bitterness there, and I still don't think there was any bitterness there. I just wasn't interested, but I kind of gradually have gotten back into it, I guess. Part of it has been brought on by fantasy football and, that whole engagement of, watching certain players and cheering for certain players. So, So yeah, now it's definitely more of a spectator, and fun deal for me and my family to do together.
All right, let's dive into it. Your why me moment. Can you reflect on a standout why me moment in your own life?
Absolutely. I mean, and it kind of, it's funny that we talked about ACLs a little bit, as it relates to my football career and my life in general. A big why me moment. 2012, I was playing football in Cleveland, got hurt that season and didn't play, about 90% of that season. I was on IR. And then in 2013 in Cleveland, I actually got cut for that entire season. So I was out of football. So 2014, my agent hooked me up with an opportunity basically to try out for the Denver Broncos. And so, at this point, this is year 6 for me, but the last 2 years I was basically out of football. So there's a lot riding on this opportunity. Like, is my career going to continue, or am I, not going to make this football team? And, that kind of be it. And, I get to Denver and everything is going great. Peyton Manning is the quarterback. Training camp is going well. He's starting to pull me aside and say, "Hey, Jordan, I want you to do some things this way." So in the back of my head, I'm like, if Peyton's pulling me aside, I'm about to make this football team. And then boom, I tear my ACL. So after 2 years of not being in football, I get this, very fortunate opportunity to be even in training camp, with the Denver Broncos, and then start to, find my way into the good graces of, the coaching staff and Peyton Manning. And then I tear my ACL. So that was definitely a why me moment. I think it was also a moment that God was preparing me for. It was something that I actually did say, why me? But coming from a place of, why me, God? What are you going to do with this? I cannot wait to see, what good is going to come of this. So it was a place that I was, fortunately mature in my faith. It's something that I was not. Probably the first 2.5 years of my NFL career, I was not either mature in my faith, to be honest. So I do think it's something that God was preparing me for. I was very confident that God was going to use this same ACL, that injured me and took me out of football for a season, to literally stand up on and run on, to do something. And I think, the answer to that why me, came in winning a Super Bowl and, and that giving me an opportunity then to, have an even, higher platform to, confess God's grace and God's goodness for, what he did for me in that why me moment. So yeah, that's definitely my why me that changed the trajectory of, my football career, but more importantly, my life and my platform to be able to share, the good news of what God has done in my life.
It's incredible because an injury can either take you out just physically or it can take you out physically and emotionally.
Right.
If you're not in the right headspace for that recovery. And so it's incredible that God prepared you for that moment to be like, okay, God's going to use this. Let's just be committed to the process. It's great.
It was still very challenging.
Sure.
but I was definitely prepared, spiritually, physically. And, even through that process, I met my wife, here in Denver. She was like the first person I met here in Denver. And when I tore my ACL, she was the only person I knew. So she actually we were just dating at the time, but she drove me to my surgery and picked me up and, helped me find an apartment. I was living in a hotel before I tore my ACL because I didn't know if I was going to make the team. So just a lot of, life stories kind of intertwined, into, this season ending injury, that, also could have been career ending.
You talk about your wife, you talk about being a father. How many little ones do you have?
We have 2. We have a 7-year-old and a 5-year-old.
Boys, girls?
Franny is our, daughter. She's 7, and Isaiah. So one of each.
Do you think that looking at how you grew up and having a dad who's a coach and now, former, professional athlete, Super Bowl champ, an encourager to have your son or daughter play football?
I'm pretty indifferent. on this specific sport. I'm definitely an encourager of, playing sports or, being involved with music. My wife's a musician. So I'm definitely an encourager, but it doesn't have to be football.
What now? What's on the table for the future?
Yeah, so I'm at this point an entrepreneur. Like I mentioned, at the top of the show, I am a creative at heart. So my wife and I shoot photography together, and then I've started a couple businesses. One in the blockchain space, Web3, cryptocurrencies, NFTs, that whole deal. And then another business, or do some real estate. And then also another business in the holistic wellness industry, like CBD products.
From undrafted to Super Bowl champion, at Jordan Norwood on the Insta, JordanNorwood. Jordan, my friend, thank you for taking some time and sharing your heart today.
Absolutely. I appreciate you having me.
I think that just goes to show it doesn't matter where you start. It's how hard you work. And, you go from you're a college football player to being undrafted to a lot of people will be like, well, I guess football's not my thing, to he's like, no, I'm going to work hard and become Super Bowl champ.
Yeah. Also, I found it fascinating that in a why me moment that I know for me was pretty dark, having an injury, but he was in a better mental headspace to navigate that. And I think that's a really great example of how if you can change your perception of where you are, you can weather the storm a lot easier. And so I just thought that's so encouraging. You're in a bad situation. What benefits, what pros can you pull away? Because in every situation, no matter how terrible it feels, even if it's a mustard seed size, there is something that you can hold on to.
Thank you to you for following us on all the socials, for downloading Apple Podcast or Spotify. When it comes to the social media, though, Hollie, we need the reviews, we need the subscribes, we need the rates, whatever.
Yeah, exactly. So please, if you were encouraged today, make sure whatever podcast platform you're on, you give us a 5-star rating and write a little review about something that you appreciated about the episode. And even on our socials, let us know what was your takeaway, and we'll let other people know about those takeaways. Hopefully on Tuesdays, we'll share your takeaways, not ours.
No, don't forget, you can also check out places like Edify and faithstrongtoday.com.